understand how the world works and to report on things that we believe are absolutely valid. But if we just report on facts, we'll be fine, and try not to manipulate audiences. I think that is the least we can do as Americans trying to convey information. And that's what we're going to try to do on this show, just allow people a platform to talk about what they know and to share it with others. So let's get the show on the road. We're going to have a terrific discussion today, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheimer. Today, we're discussing autism and how both children and adults are living full lives with different manifestation of this attribute of autism. Our special guests today are Patrick Paul, Executive Director and CEO of the Anderson Center for Autism in New York, Daniel Openden, President and CEO of Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center in Phoenix, Arizona, and Brad Boardman, Executive Director of the Morgan Autism Center in California. And a reminder to Zoom attendees that we will take 3 snap polls during the show, and we'll announce results, and your questions submitted through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen will be included in our discussion. So thank you all for joining us. This is just great to have you here. I'm so excited to talk with you about this really important topic.
Very glad to be here, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful. So I'm going to set you up, and we'll go over to you, Patrick. April is World Autism Month, and we wanted to honor all who live with autism, all who serve those who live with autism, and support the autism community. The CDC currently estimates that approximately 1 in 36 children aged 8 years old in the United States is diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, and of those, 4% are boys and 1% are girls. So it affects boys more than girls, and it's striking that we are finding more diagnoses, and that has led to some concerns about what is the cause of autism and how it manifests and so on. So Patrick, let's go to you first. Let's talk a little bit about what autism is and why there seems to be a greater diagnosis. Are we becoming more aware as we analyze this condition? Or becoming more aware of what the constituent parts of autism are?
Autism is a developmental disability, and it's something. It's around the world. It's not just in the United States. It's not just in developed countries. We provide training and services around the world. So the surveillance may not be as good in those other countries, but there's suspicion that it produces itself or it presents itself as often in other countries as it does in the United States. 1 in 36 is a new number that's come out. We started a radio show many years ago that was 1 in 88, and we've had to change it progressively over the last 10 or 12 years. I'm thinking about that long, and now we've changed it more recently to 1 in 36. So if it gives you an idea of how often that statistic is changing, how new information is being presented, it gives you an idea and how quickly this seems to be moving, and how many families and people and communities and individuals that this is impacting. Why the diagnosis is occurring? We get a lot of reasons why that are presented to us from science, and I don't know if people have exactly figured out what that is. The puzzle piece has always been something that's been presented as trying to figure out exactly what's going on, but I think we're still trying to figure out why it's happening more and more as time goes on. Or is it just surveillance, or is the fact that it's being diagnosed more? It's sort of up in the air. Anderson, as an organization, we do research, we provide services, we do training. We're on the side of service delivery. Even though we work with research, the research we're doing is on treatment. It's not on cause, but we do work with other organizations that are working with that, and we provide information to them as they ask, and we involve our families in that research that's looking for a cause. But it is out there. I mean, we're not exactly sure. But Anderson, like I said, our focus is really on services and treatment for individuals with autism and their families.
Annie, I wonder, as you know, in terms of if you take a look at my own family history and you take a look at people who I know, there are people throughout my family and throughout our broader circle of friends and their families and so on, who now in retrospect, we could say that, you know, maybe they were affected by some form of autism, but we didn't know it at the time, right? So I feel like over time, as I become more aware of ASD, as I become more aware of those attributes, my own layperson's sort of interpretation of data, a diagnosis of data, has shifted. Is that what has gone on over the last 10 and 15 years? Have we become more aware, more capable of understanding those attributes that can be ascribed to ASD?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely what we're seeing more of. I agree wholeheartedly with Patrick. No one has the full answer to this question or why we've seen this big increase in the number of kids diagnosed with autism. And at the same time, we know, at least in the more recent years, that that the numbers have continued to rise, largely because we've been better able at identifying autism. We have a lot more awareness. We have better detection methods. We're working on screening programs with pediatricians, with schools. That's something that SARC has been really active with as well. We also know that there's something called diagnostic substitution, right? So kids that maybe would have gotten a intellectual disability impairment or maybe childhood schizophrenia decades ago are now being identified as having autism. And then finally, we're also seeing an increase in the number of kids with more mild forms of autism, which is probably what you're getting to a little bit, Mark, is that you can kind of look back at this and go, well, maybe they were on the spectrum. And at the same time, it's important to remember that there is a whole large population, probably one out of every 250 Americans, that are experiencing really profound autism as well and have really severe needs. And we need to make sure we don't have them overlooked as well.
One of the things that one of my early experiences, Brad, was when I was in college as a freshman. There was a young person who exhibited certain behavioral attributes that caused others around to mock him and to treat him in a very poor way. I was not one of those, but I did not go to his defense as I would today, because I was mystified. It was these behaviors were so they were so out of the norm, and I didn't know what to think. And by the time I sort of gathered my thoughts and so on, he had left the school. So I look at that with a lot of regret, and I look at that as the people who were mocking him were not evil people. They just didn't understand, really.
Yeah, it's funny, Mark. I have a very similar story to yours. In middle school, I knew an individual who was kind of in the same situation, and so that understanding has come a long way in the years since you and I were back in school, in some really great ways. I think for me as a director of a school program, an adult program, you know, it's always been really important for me to provide our students and adults with opportunities to integrate and work with their peers who may be neurotypical, et cetera. But even more important, and this is kind of my evolution over time, is it's really important for those neurotypical kids to really have a chance to interact with us and get to understand what defines autism, what the challenges are, and how to support people with autism.
That's such an important point, right? It's advantageous for us to extend ourselves beyond our knowledge base and to extend ourselves beyond the norm, right? Because who knows, we can actually learn something from that experience. So let's talk a little bit about how you provide your services, because what you basically do is you galvanize a community to help others in the community, right? Each of you takes your own cut on this. So let's go through your programs. Patrick, if you could give us a real summary of the kinds of services that you provide, and then Danny, and then Brad, because I think what we'll find is there's a lot of intersectionality, right?
Well, Anderson Center for Autism has been around. We're going to be celebrating our 100th year. We didn't always focus on autism, but probably for the last 25 years, we've had a program that's grown into an autism-only program. So that's always served as individuals, their families with autism. And we support the community and helping to support those individuals and families with autism. We're located, our headquarters are located here in Statsburg, New York, which is north of Poughkeepsie in New York. We have a school program. And we have a residential school program. We have an adult program. We do consultation to school districts. We have telehealth. We have autism insurance program. We do preschools. We have approximately 1,000 employees altogether that are providing services. And in our adult program, we have 25 group homes in the community, 4 lifelong learning centers. We train people from around the world, 80 countries and increasing. We do consultation across the world to many of the countries that we actually get trainees from. We're very focused on quality of life, optimizing the quality of life of individuals with autism around the world. We have a school program here. We take children from all over the country, California, Illinois, New Jersey. You think about it, we have them here. And I want to touch on what Danny says, on our campus, in our adult program that we have, residential program, we really do serve the most profound individuals who have autism. And that's about 27% was the last data point that I've gotten that have profound autism. And I never want to forget those folks. Because sometimes people think about the person they met in school. We talked about that. I had somebody I met. I'm absolutely sure they had autism, and they had some of the same obstacles that you folks are talking about. But there is a group of individuals that really have significant issues. They have significant challenges that they really need a lot of support. Some of them self-injurious. Some of them also can be aggressive. They have a lot of comorbid conditions that are associated. So that's just a group of folks that we serve. We also serve people in school districts. We serve people at home, insurance. So those are the folks who are less profound, people who are more the types that you would have seen when you were in school at the time, people in the community that live more independently. We kind of go across the gambit. We service a lot of people from a lot of places, and we're happy to do that.
And Danny, do you run the entire gambit as well?
We do. So I'll zoom way out and tell you that SARC's vision is people with autism meaningfully integrated into inclusive communities. And you'll see how our program offerings sort of all lay into that vision as well. So our earliest program is called our community school, which is an inclusive preschool program for children with autism integrated with typically developing students. And these kids, you've got half with autism, half without, and those kids without are going to be future classmates at schools, teammates on sports teams, one day employers or coworkers, maybe even employees of people with autism as well.
You're modeling society the way it should work, right? Where we are a real America, which includes all of its citizens, right? And we're taking care of each other.
Yeah, that's right. And it starts for us in our community school. But we also have a 4-week program. It's sort of your intro to autism we call Jumpstart. We provide lots of services in the home, school, and community. So wherever, to your point, Mark, wherever you see typically developing kids, teens, or adults, that's where SARC people are working as well. And then we also provide services for those teens and adults too. We have a program called Community Works, which is really about pre-employment opportunities for teens with autism, partnered with various places in our community to learn job skills. And then with our adult services, we're again helping them integrate and live as independently as possible. So we have an employment services program. We partner with our sister nonprofit called First Place, which is a residential program for people with autism. We provide what's called the First Place Transition Academy. It's a 2-year program that works on developing the independent living skills of adults with autism to live independently after 2 years in the program. We're actually enrolling for that program right now for the new school year all across the country to be able to offer young adults that as well. And then what I would tell you, Mark, is that we like to say that at SARC, we are as committed to improving the behaviors and skills of people with autism as we are to improving the behaviors and skills of the communities in which they live. And our focus, as much as we focus on people with autism, we're working with businesses, we're working with employers, with schools, with after-school providers, with police officers, with recreational providers, to find ways to better integrate people with autism into our communities.
And we see this, we've done searches for organizations that serve the autism community in Annapolis, Maryland, Providence Center, or Albertina Kerr in Oregon, or Hope Services, or Community Gay Path, Ability Path now. We're actually seeing this kind of an integrative approach gaining more and more traction, rather than, Brad, segregating populations. You're basically accepting and embracing people and looking at this as a bi-directional educational opportunity, right?
Yeah, I mean, at our core, we are a school and adult day program for individuals. The students and adults we serve tend to have some pretty extensive support needs. And so our school program is actually a one-to-one program. For every student who's on our school campus, there's a staff person. That's the level of support that our students really require. 90% of our students are nonverbal. So communication is a really big push for us. And we utilize a lot of technology to help us with teaching these individuals how to communicate their wants, needs, and beyond. And so a very supportive model, but also we understand the limitations of that too. And so we want our students and adults to have community experiences and get out and interact with peers and so on. So we have a reverse mainstreaming program for our school, where we have relationships with private schools in the area and have kids visiting our campus and interacting with our students. And of course, our adults are out in the community interacting with everybody out in the community. So super important.
What is the biggest change that we have to have in ourselves in terms of our own attitudes? One of the things that I've detected in myself is that if I don't get what I feel emotionally is the norm in terms of interactions with somebody, I tend to blame that other person, right? I want to have the feedback, the communication, the verbal, as Brad said, a lot of people who have severe autism are nonverbal, right? I want to have that verbal interaction. I'm not getting it. I blame that person. It's not me, it's them. But maybe it's me. Danny, what do you think? I mean, do I have to think more expansively about my own interactions, how I move through the world? If I'm going to take advantage of the gifts that somebody is offering me, maybe it's a nonverbal gift. Maybe it's a different way of being.
So, Mark, I had a great story that answers that question directly. We have, over the last year and a half, created a self-advocate advisory board. These are adults with autism advising the organization on our marketing, programs, research, services, et cetera. And about 6 months ago, we were discussing one of our teen programs, which is called Peers, that teaches social skills to teens with autism. And for the first time, we were getting a lot of pushback from this group of people on the spectrum and asking a lot of tough questions about what we were doing. And as we continued to talk through of it, finally, we kind of had this breakthrough where somebody said, social interactions take place between 2 or more people, yet the burden of making those social interactions successful often relies on people with autism, the very people with a disability that are trying to learn these social skills. And then one of them, another one raised his hand and said, why is it that people without autism, why can't they simply meet us halfway? And we have been really trying to share this story with our community as much as we can, because we do exactly what you said, Mark. Like, we've got people with autism across the lifespan that work so hard to develop the skills to be successful in our communities. They need us to meet them halfway. And in some of the cases of the people that Patrick described that he serves, and Brad serves at the Morgan Center, we actually need people to go more than halfway to meet some of these people as well. So I think you're absolutely right. I think we need to make sure that we understand that people with autism are working hard to develop these skills, and we've got a responsibility as a supportive community to meet them halfway to help them be successful and integrate into our communities.
Patrick, I want to ask you a question about my conduct as somebody who employs people. I had a situation in which I was looking for a particular type of individual. And in my business, we recruit nonprofit leaders like yours, like you, and members of your team, and so on and so forth. And we had somebody come in who was quite obviously on the spectrum. And it was very difficult for me to conceive of how to employ this person. And at the end of the day, I couldn't make that move, right? It wasn't that the person wasn't intelligent, it wasn't that but the communication issue where we are interacting in rapid fire interactions like this was going to be an insurmountable issue. That instance stuck with me because I feel that it's a failure on my, not because the analysis was wrong, the analysis was correct. The decision was probably correct, but I'm not part of a solution in that particular case, right? So how do I shift? How do I end up making a positive contribution that allows my business to actually function? How can I change? Patrick, how do you counsel people like me to evolve my own attitudes and my own approaches to these things?
Yeah, I mean, the way I've always looked at it for work and employment is it has to be a right fit. Yeah, I mean, whether you have autism or you don't have autism, if you put somebody in a position where they're not going to be successful because of who they are, the way that they were brought up, it's just not going to be successful. So
that's why I said it was probably the right decision. But just because you make the right decision doesn't mean that you don't process.
And I think that you also have to extend yourself. You have to put yourself in the uncomfortable situations that are uncomfortable to you that maybe are not uncomfortable to the individual who's approaching for the job. Give an opportunity for both folks to kind of figure out how they can make it work. And like I said before, every individual who has autism is an individual that, I there's certain things I'm not going to do. You can point to a lot of jobs. I am just not going to do it because I don't like heights. I don't like loud noises. I don't like a lot of things. That's not the job for me. But what we have to do is we have to find where the individual finds the spot where it works for them, like anybody else. And maybe take a little bit more time, a little bit more effort. You have to extend yourself if you're an employer a little bit more to accommodate certain things. And don't get me wrong, I think we do it all the time for people anyway. I just don't think that we look at someone with autism and realize it's just the same accommodation, a little bit different. Right? There may be somebody who approaches you who potentially may have a physical disability or maybe has some medical needs that you need to sort of work on. They may need to bring their dog to work because their dog is some sort of therapy animal, right? We all make ways to make that happen, but sometimes when you have somebody with autism come through the door and they want to do something, it's something that maybe is not as usual as people normally have to make accommodations for, but it's something they can probably do in many cases, especially if that individual is interested in doing that and has some prerequisite skills.
Brad, what is your answer to this?
I mean, I would say it goes beyond you, Mark. I think you have to build a culture too at your workplace where people are looking at what individuals are able to do and contribute to your organization, rather than just maybe seeing maybe a social challenge or something like that. So you really want to build a workplace where everyone is really looking at people for the value they can provide. I agree with Patrick that you gotta find the right fit too. There's no sense in putting someone in a position where they're going to fail, but sometimes you have to stretch a little bit and get your coworkers and everybody else to stretch a little bit to accommodate someone who's really going to provide some amazing value to the organization.
And I think that in order to stretch, you also have to be hard-nosed about it. I mean, what you're saying is you should stretch, but it's got to work, right? You have to be really good at making things work and work well. Because if what you're doing is you're creating an accommodation that won't work for the person, won't work for the organization, won't work for the clientele, you're not helping anything. You're basically trying to twist everybody into a pretzel in a way that's completely dysfunctional. You have to be better than that, right? You have to have a higher degree of skill in order to make it work for society. And that's sort of the same situation for the United States. Let's talk, Brad. We're going to go around. We're coming to the end of our time, so we're going to go around the room one more time with Brad. We're going to start with you, and then Danny. And we're going to end up with Patrick. Talk about how you see your organizations evolving in the next several years. What kind of initiatives are that particularly stand out, and what kind of needs do you have going forward?
Well, so I've been doing this for now 30 years. And in the time that I've been with Morgan Autism Center, it's become very apparent to me that individuals with those extensive support needs, especially as they age and they get into adulthood, the really good options for them to be a part of their community and participate and do meaningful work and those kinds of things drops off in some pretty big ways. And so adult day programming, those kinds of services, I think they're just going to have to get better, and they're going to have to start accommodating these children who are growing up and exiting the education system, essentially. Not everyone exits the education system and can go off and get a job. Some of these individuals really do need the support of a day program or something like that. And so I see that for us as an organization, that's something that we really want to push.
And by the way, we find this same point mirrored across different sectors. We find it mirrored across childcare, elder care, people with various conditions, physical conditions, mental health issues. We have a situation in which we have an aging society. So caring is going to be, it's not just autism, right? This is, in a sense, autism is just part of the group that requires, a lot of care. By the way, Danny, we just did several polls. One, we found that 2/3 of the people who responded either are directly affected or indirectly affected by ASD in some way through their family and friends. The other poll that I thought was really interesting is we asked, what do you think are the most challenging aspects of living with autism? And we found that there were 3. It's interesting. Stigma. In other words, stigma of people who are not aware of autism, financial hardship, really, really important, and then safety all around, right? Very interesting. And then we also have the last question, which is interesting. It's about support, and it looks like the vast majority of people think that it is an all of society issue, which really mirrors, Danny, what you said, what Brad said, and what Patrick has said. Could you just give us an orientation on what's next for Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center?
Sure. So we've set a strategic plan that by 2030, SARC will become a statewide organization that puts effective services within reach of every Arizonan. And there is a part of that is very focused on our physical locations. So we're going to go from 4 campuses to 9 spread throughout the state by 2030. We're in a silent phase of a capital campaign to be able to make that possible now. But we know it's not just the physical locations that we need to focus on. We need technology as a way to be able to get there. So we have an app called Think Autism that we want to get in the hands of more people, to get people identified at an earlier age, and particularly in schools when they get missed by their pediatricians. We know we need to work on public policy changes, and we know that we need to continue to work with building out our inclusive, supportive communities for people with autism as well. And then finally, as we look at adults, we've been saying this for years, but it's somewhere in the range of about 500,000 or 50,000 people a year are entering adulthood, and they're going to be adults much longer than their children. And so we're very focused on how we build out the right systems, processes, programs, and communities to support adults with autism and to help them live as independently as possible. In fact, a major initiative for us over the last 4 or 5 years that we see going forward is we have to be able to quantify outcomes for people with autism. And we're actually learning how to do that by working with adults with autism, because we're looking at what their outcomes are going to be. And what we used to look at a 3-year-old and say, what are they going to be like at 6? Now we're looking at a 3-year-old and say, what are they going to look like at 33? And trying to measure our outcomes based on that. And they're all centered around trying to maximize independence for people with autism as much as possible.
I think Arizona is a very interesting model. I'd like to stay connected with all of you. And in this initiative, Arizona functions as a bullseye, right? Where you have Phoenix, Scottsdale, Tucson being sort of the population center, maybe arguably Flagstaff, Prescott, and so on. But beyond those urban centers, people are widely dispersed. To provide a statewide solution, we're doing the same thing in Colorado with the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. It's a very interesting model, which has a lot of resonance throughout the United States. So thanks for sharing that. Patrick, what's next in New York for the Anderson Center for Autism?
Well, we serve everybody across the country in one way or another, whether it's telehealth, it's people coming and receiving services on here in New York. We continue to expand. We're actually going out to do a little bit more of the autism supportive environment work that we do in California and other places. We're more on the international front right now. We're actually we're doing consultation to Saudi Arabia. We're doing consultation to India on really developing services there for it's a completely different way of providing services, and it's something that we've been working on for years. And we're expanding our footprint further with relationships with other organizations throughout the world. So inside the United States, we're hoping to actually expand out to a couple other states providing service. And so I think that's going to be an interesting next 10 years or so, and I'm excited about it.
Well, serving international communities is such a sophisticated issue. We have, as I think I said before the show, we have in our small group 7 different nationalities. We speak 6 or 7 different languages. You're talking about linguistic differences, the differences in medical systems. You have regulations, societal attitudes. Yeah. Very complex, right? I mean, when I speak with Zuki Waita, who comes from Kenya, and talking about the attitudes of the various countries in the continent of Africa, right? And then you talk with Joanna Nowacka, who's from Poland, or various other people, Oscar Quiros, who is from Mexico. You have this incredible complexity. I'd like to stay connected with you as well in terms of how you're going to reshape your organization to create this more international footprint. And Brad, you're in my neighborhood, so we can actually meet in person. What a concept.
That would be great. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Patrick Paul, Executive Director and CEO of the Anderson Center for Autism in New York, Daniel Openden, President and CEO of the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center, and Brad Boardman, Executive Director of the Morgan Autism Center in California. Thank you so much for sharing the work of your people, your community, your staffs, your volunteers, your families, your funders. It's been a really exciting discussion. Thank you.